The Black Maid's hidden talent saves the millionaire's biggest deal yet. The 50th floor boardroom of Sterling Holdings in downtown Chicago hummed with a cold, artificial silence. Sunlight cut through the vast glass walls, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A detail only a man who cleaned them would notice. That man was Elias, his gray uniform blending into the muted tones of the corporate world around him. For 20 years, he had been a ghost in this machine, polishing the tables where million-dollar deals were made, emptying the bins that held the discarded dreams of ambitious young men. A sharp, arrogant voice shattered the quiet. "Did you not hear me? I said this model is to be left untouched." Mark Jensen, the newly appointed director of innovation, stood with his hands on his hips. At 32, he wore his ambition like his tailored Italian suit, sharp, expensive, and with no room for error. He pointed a disdainful finger at a state-of-the-art architectural model of a skyscraper, the centerpiece of the room. Someone moved the central tower piece. "Was it you?" Elias, who had been quietly wiping down the far end of the long mahogany table, froze. He hadn't touched the model. He knew its fragility better than anyone. He simply shook his head, his voice quiet. "No, sir. I was just cleaning." "Just cleaning?" Jensen scoffed, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. The other junior executives in the room shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting from Jensen's face to the old janitor. Jensen picked up a small, intricately detailed spire from the model, a piece he himself had misplaced earlier. He held it up for everyone to see. "This is the key to a 9-figure deal. It's not a toy for the help to play with." He didn't wait for a response. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the spire into the metal waste bin Elias had just emptied. "Now, it's where it belongs, with the rest of the trash." Elias's jaw tightened, but his expression remained a mask of practiced neutrality. His gaze flickered to the waste bin. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was a symbol of the foundation, the core idea of a building meant to touch the sky. And Jensen had just thrown it away without a second thought, discarding it as easily as he discarded the humanity of the man standing before him. The other executives remained silent, their discomfort a testament to the casual cruelty they had just witnessed. They were part of a system that allowed a man's dignity to be thrown away with the office trash. The silence in the boardroom stretched, thick with unspoken judgment. A few of the younger associates exchanged uneasy glances. They were new enough to still feel the sting of second-hand humiliation. One of them, a young woman named Clara, looked down at her tablet, her own face flushed with shame for her boss's behavior. She had seen Elias work. She knew the quiet pride he took in maintaining this space, the care with which he navigated their world. This felt wrong. It was a crack in the polished facade of corporate professionalism. Elias did not react with anger. He simply gave a slow, respectful nod. "Yes, sir." He finished wiping the table, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Each swipe of his cloth was an act of quiet defiance, a refusal to let another man's arrogance disrupt his own sense of duty. He moved towards the waste bin, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the simmering tension in the room. He didn't look at Jensen. He didn't need to. He had seen 100 Jensens in his 20 years. They were temporary. Pride and foundation were not. As he picked up the bin, his hand brushed against the discarded spire. For a fleeting moment, his fingers closed around it. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement. In that brief touch, a lifetime of forgotten knowledge passed through him. He saw not a piece of plastic, but the complex load-bearing calculations it represented. He saw the flaw in its placement in the original model, a subtle error in structural physics that only a trained eye would spot. He had designed buildings like this once, in another life, before circumstances had forced him to trade his blueprints for a broom. Jensen, completely oblivious, had already turned his back. He was laughing with another executive, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who believed he had just made a point about authority. He had mistaken silence for submission. He saw an old janitor, not a man with a mind that had once erected skyscrapers from pencil and paper. It was a profound miscalculation. Jensen thought he was looking at the bottom of the ladder, but he was blind to the fact that Elias was the man who had helped build the ladder in the first place. The stage was set for a fall, but not for the man holding the dust cloth. The next day, the crisis hit. Sterling Holdings was on the verge of losing the Odyssey Tower project, the biggest deal in its 50-year history. The clients were flying in for a final review in 48 hours, and they had just sent an email flagging a critical flaw in the structural integrity simulations. Panic rippled through the 50th floor. The flaw was precisely what Elias had noticed: an instability in the central tower under high-wind simulations, a direct result of the design championed by Jensen. In the glass-walled conference room, Jensen was defensive. The simulations must be wrong. My design is groundbreaking. He paced frantically, his voice sharp with a fear he tried to mask with aggression. The CEO, Mr. Harrison, a man in his late 60s with a face etched by decades of navigating corporate storms, looked at his team with weary disappointment. Groundbreaking doesn't matter if it falls over, Mark. Find a solution. Now! Later that night, the building was empty, save for one man. Elias began his nightly rounds, the familiar scent of cleaning solution in the air. He entered the boardroom, the architectural model of the Odyssey Tower, now covered in red-tagged notes of failure. Jensen's team had left for the night, defeated. Elias walked over to the model, his eyes tracing the elegant but flawed lines. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, discarded spire, the symbol of Jensen's arrogance. He set the spire down on the table. From his utility cart, he took out a worn, leather-bound notebook and a simple graphite pencil, tools of a life he had left behind. He didn't use a computer. He didn't need one. With practiced ease, his hand began to move across a clean page. He wasn't just sketching. He was performing a silent, masterful surgery on the building's design. He redrew the core support structure, adding a series of subtle cross-braces inspired by the honeycomb designs of nature, a solution that was both stronger and more cost-effective. He tore the single page from his notebook and placed it next to the model. Then, he put the discarded spire on top of the paper, a silent testament to the solution. It wasn't a challenge. It was an offering. He then continued his rounds, the quiet hero leaving the answer in plain sight, hidden within the very trash Jensen had created. Mr. Harrison arrived before dawn, his mind heavy with the impending failure. The weight of his father's legacy, the company he had built, felt heavier than ever. He walked into the dark boardroom, intending to stare at the flawed model one last time before admitting defeat. His eyes, however, were drawn to a single sheet of paper lying beside it, held down by the small, familiar spire. He picked it up. It was a hand-drawn sketch. He stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. The drawing was simple, almost rustic, yet the engineering solution it proposed was anything but. It was brilliant, elegant. It didn't just fix the flaw. It improved the entire design, increasing wind resistance by 30% while reducing material costs. It was the work of a master. He looked up, confused, and saw Elias quietly cleaning the glass wall on the far side of the room. "Elias, did you do this?" Just then, Jensen and his team arrived, their faces grim. "Sir, we worked all night. We have a few options, but they're expensive," Jensen began, his voice strained. Then he saw the sketch in Harrison's hand. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "What is that? Did one of the interns leave their doodles here?" He walked over and glanced at the paper. His smile faltered. For a moment, his arrogant facade cracked, and a flicker of genuine confusion, then panic, crossed his face. He recognized the elegance of the solution instantly, and it terrified him because he knew it wasn't his. "This," Mr. Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet, his eyes never leaving Jensen, "is the solution." A solution that apparently appeared overnight. The room fell into a deep silence. The other executives stared, not at the drawing, but at the unfolding drama. They watched Jensen's face drain of color. They saw his hand tremble, just slightly, as he reached for the paper. The power in the room had fundamentally shifted. It was no longer about titles or suits. It was about pure, undeniable competence. The symbolic moment was clear. The janitor's humble, hand-drawn sketch had just overshadowed a multi-million-dollar team's failure. The discarded piece had become the cornerstone. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Jensen stared at the sketch, then at Elias, who had stopped cleaning and was now standing quietly by the door, a silent observer to the unraveling of a lie. The other executives avoided Jensen's eyes. Their silence was a verdict. They had witnessed his arrogance, and now they were witnessing his downfall. They had chosen to follow a man of style over a man of substance, and this was the result. Mr. Harrison turned to Elias, his voice filled with a respect that had been absent for 20 years. "Elias, I'd like you to join us at the table. It seems we have a design to discuss." He wasn't asking. He was inviting him to take his rightful place. He gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table, the one usually reserved for the lead architect. Jensen, desperate to reclaim control, stammered, "This is absurd. He's the janitor. It's probably just a lucky guess. We can't present a scribble to the clients." His protest was weak, pathetic. The contempt he had shown earlier had curdled into fear. He had built his career on perception, and in an instant, that perception had been shattered. Elias walked slowly to the table, but did not sit. He looked at Mr. Harrison, then at the assembled team. He spoke, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of decades of silent observation. "A building is not about how it looks, sir. It's about its foundation. If the foundation is weak, everything built on top of it will eventually fall." He wasn't just talking about the skyscraper. He was talking about the company. He was talking about Jensen. He was delivering the moral of the story with humble grace, leaving no room for argument. The room was still, the lesson echoing off the glass walls. True value wasn't in a title or a suit, but in the unseen, uncelebrated work that holds everything together. 6 months later, the Chicago skyline was different. The Odyssey Tower was under construction, its frame climbing towards the clouds, built upon a foundation redesigned by Elias. Inside Sterling Holdings, the changes were just as dramatic. Elias was no longer a ghost in a gray uniform. He was the head of the newly created Sterling Foundation program, a revolutionary initiative designed by Mr. Harrison to review and reward innovative ideas from every single employee, from the mailroom to the boardroom. Elias's office, on the 48th floor, had a view of the rising tower. His old, leather-bound notebook lay open on his new desk, next to a state-of-the-art computer. His story had become a quiet legend, featured in an online architecture journal and shared widely on professional networks. The headline read, "The janitor who reminded a city how to build." He wasn't just building a skyscraper. He was rebuilding a company's culture. Clara, the young executive who had felt shame for her boss's actions, now worked as Elias's chief aide. She walked into his office, holding a tablet. "Elias, the submissions for the foundation program are up 50% this month. An idea from the catering staff just saved us $10,000 on the downtown renovation project." She smiled, a genuine expression of admiration. "You really did it. You changed things." Elias looked out the window at the steel skeleton of the tower. He had not sought victory or revenge. He had sought to fix what was broken, and in doing so, had built something stronger and more just for everyone. The system was changing, one idea at a time. Mark Jensen's new office was a small, rented cubicle in a shared workspace on the outskirts of the city. There were no glass walls, no mahogany desk. His view was of a brick wall. He had been let go from Sterling Holdings the day after the meeting, with a quiet severance package and a reputation that was now toxic in the industry. The story of his public humiliation at the hands of a janitor had spread like wildfire. On his stark white desk sat a single, framed photo of himself standing proudly in front of the old Odyssey Tower model. It was a picture of a man at the peak of his perceived power, a moment before his world crumbled. He often found himself staring at it, tracing the lines of the building he had almost destroyed. He whispered to the empty room, his voice barely audible. He was just a janitor. The words held no conviction. They were the hollow echo of a belief he no longer held. He knew the truth. He had been so focused on reaching the top floor that he had forgotten that every skyscraper and every career needs a solid foundation. His was built on sand, and it had washed away. True greatness is not about the title you hold or the authority you wield. It is built quietly, in the unseen moments of diligence, integrity, and the courage to care about the foundation when no one else is looking. It's about recognizing the value in every person, not just the ones who sit at the table. The final image is of Elias, back in the boardroom after hours. He is not cleaning. He is mentoring a group of young interns from diverse backgrounds, pointing to a blueprint on the table. On the corner of the table sits his old, worn-out graphite pencil, repurposed not as a tool for a forgotten life, but as a symbol of a new beginning. It lies next to a brand new laptop, a perfect blend of old wisdom and new opportunity. The world is full of hidden talent, waiting in the wings. How many brilliant minds do we walk past every day without a second glance?